Thank you for joining us. My name is Lisa Ammon, and I serve as president of the Louisville Forum. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984, and we host debates and discussion on contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues. We cover topics from heroin addiction to the Confederate monument, and also analyze the elections this year. So we have really good programming, and for more information on the Louisville Forum or our programs or to make reservations, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org. All right, now for our topic this month, why the UofL UK rivalry matters. Kent Spencer will be our moderator today. Kent Spencer joined WHAS11 in October of 2011 as a weekday sports anchor. Ken comes to Louisville from WTVQ in Lexington, where he was the sports director for 5 years. He also spent time as a general assignment reporter. Kent got his start in the news business in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where he developed a true appreciation of his home state, which is why he has passion for the Cards, Cats, and Hoosiers. In 2001, Kent graduated from Morehead State University. While at Morehead, Kent played football for the Eagles. Please welcome Kent Spencer.
From my bio, she also left out that I love surfing and mountain climbing. Since I've been in broadcasting, despite the 2 years that I spent in Arkansas, I have been absolutely entrenched by this rivalry, and it is going to be massive here in a week when those two teams meet in the KFC Yum Center at 7 o'clock. And for me, despite what the four-letter network will tell you, I believe that this is hands down the greatest rivalry in college basketball. When you have two programs that are this storied, and this is why this rivalry is, I think, is so special to me. I'm going to take you back. I was already working at WHAS. It was 2012. It was the Final Four in New Orleans. I want to see a show of hands. Was there anybody at that game in New Orleans? We got a couple show of hands. I remember driving from the hotel to the Superdome that day and going through New Orleans, and you already saw everything on Bourbon Street, from the days leading up to the game. But it was a town painted in both red and blue. Now, you would also say, well, Kansas and Ohio State were also in that Final Four, so, that's not a coincidence. No, there was really nobody there from Kansas, and there was nobody there from Ohio State. This was Louisville and Kentucky. They took over. It was like everybody just transplanted down south to New Orleans to eat some gumbo and watch some basketball. The moment that stands out to me, and every time I think about it, I still get goosebumps. Hair still stands up on my arms. The national anthem that day, and I think Tom obviously was there. But I'm standing there, and the national anthem is playing, and everybody is standing up, and I'm looking around in this Superdome, and everybody is singing together, and I've just taken it all in, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing known to mankind, that these two teams are playing here and everybody is joined together. Now, in about 2.5 minutes, when this song wraps up, it's a different story. But I really, in my broadcasting career, if I had a single moment that stands out more than any else, that stands out to me, because in that moment, the state of Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, they ruled college basketball. Kentucky obviously goes on to win that game. They win the national championship. Louisville responds the very next year and wins the national championship in Atlanta. And I'm sitting there thinking, heck, I'm the good luck charm. I move here, and everybody's winning national championships. So that's why this rivalry is so special to me. I'm going to introduce Tom Leach, who is the voice of the Kentucky Wildcats. He also hosts a daily radio show on 1080 a.m. called The Leach Report. The man to my right is a good friend of mine, Tony Vanetti, who hosts the Afternoon Underdogs. He's also a regular contributor on WHAS11's Great Day Live. He's also on you have more jobs than anybody I've ever known. It is amazing. And then the gentleman to my left is Dr. Rick Grieve, who works for Western Kentucky University. He has been researching and writing about fandom and rivalries since the 90s. So who better else when you're talking about a forum about fandom and rivalries and everybody taking this whole thing in, especially for the next week. This is the guy that I'm really interested in hearing about. But first I want to start with Tom. Can you guys just start and just describe, just in general, what this particular rivalry means to you?
Well, it's probably the biggest game of the year for the people that are listening to us. It may not necessarily be for the teams. Especially in basketball, they hope to play for a national championship down the road. And for the football teams, how they do in their league could get them to a national championship. But it's this game that is the be-all, end-all, and especially in this city because it's kind of the front lines. Because you've got whatever the percentage is of overall fans in this city that it breaks down between Louisville and Kentucky. It's pretty even, I would think. And if you go to work every day, you do battle. One of my best friends is a Kentucky fan down in Charlotte, so he does battle against Carolina, Duke, NC State, the whole ACC every day at work. Here, it's the same kind of battle every day when people are going to work. So it's that kind of just family rivalry, if you will, that is there, especially in this city, on the front lines of the battle every time the two teams play in anything, but especially in football and men's basketball.
I don't think it's talked about enough, and he brought it up just a little bit, Tom Leach. But what it means to me is that the dynamics of the state are set up for red versus blue, right? I mean, Louisville always has seemed to be an island on its own, right? That the state's biggest city is sort of separate than the rest of the state, right? So, and to Tom said that in Louisville you have UK and UofL fans in the same household, right? But that's not what happens out in the state, all right? Let's just say it's a lot of blue out in the state, and that's the way it's been for a long time. I don't know when that started, where Louisville was sort of just, I'm not going to go to Louisville. I'm not going to visit the city, much less that. And then when Denny Crum showed up and started to make Louisville a player, things started to change. I break down the rivalry in three different phases. The pre-play, when you're on the school bus and arguing with your buddy about who would win the game because they don't play, and then they started to play, and then Rick and Cal. That's a whole separate. That's a whole
era box
in its own. But I think the dynamics between the city of Louisville versus for the rest of the state, it goes beyond the basketball. It's just I don't think there's particularly a lot of affinity for the city of Louisville, if you would say that.
Dr. Grieve?
All right. I'm going to start out and take us a little step backwards and say a lot of what I do isn't curing cancer, but to some people it's a lot more important than that. I look at sport fandom and I look at what fandom does for us as humans. The definition of sport fan here is someone who has a psychological attachment to a given team. Usually we look at local teams, but we do also have people who are displaced. Maybe that in the short term, it would be the UK fan who's living here in Louisville, but in a larger distance or a larger scene, it may be a UL fan who's moved up north and is living, say, in Detroit. And so we look at what types of, what fandom does for folks within the social connections that they can make there. Rivalries become important in that. Rivalries are a adversarial relationship between two teams, fans, and players. And I think, to me, it comes down to a social psychological term that we have called in-group and out-group. In-group is a group that I'm a part of. Out-group is everybody else. And when we look at that, being part of an in-group gives us a sense of belonging. I happen to live down in Bowling Green. I'm about an hour north of Nashville. I tend to be a big Nashville Predators fan, and when I go down to watch the game, it's me and 17,000 of my closest friends. And I see those friends as I walk around Bowling Green or Nashville or Louisville. They're the people wearing the big saber-toothed tiger on their chest or on their hat. And I have an immediate connection with them. And I think that's what fandom does for us, is it gives us a connection to something larger than ourselves.
It's funny that you say that, because I think when you see somebody who is wearing the same, like let's say I go to a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I could go up to somebody who's a Bengals fan and it's almost like, brother, come here, But if you see that same person on the street, you wouldn't probably talk to him. You wouldn't even speak to him. But in that moment, you're family. I think that's part of it, and the sense
And you
of
all could be
community.
depressed together.
So,
Just saying.
But here's the thing: I truly feel like the basketball rivalry is the greatest rivalry in college basketball. I don't feel that way about football in this rivalry. But here's the deal: if you look, and I want to open it up to everybody, and whoever wants to speak can. The football teams, they don't like each other much more than the basketball teams do. I remember in 2012, and you may not know this, the basketball teams hung out the night before the game.
Well,
I mean,
to that
they
point,
hugged.
there was a social media, and I was going to bring that up, that you said we all thought when that, and Tom can speak of that, we all thought this was going to be crazy. New Orleans, a lot of booze, UK and UofL, there's going to be trouble. Like, this is going to be epic, and they better have a lot of cops. But then at the beginning of the week, before fans even started to go, there was a picture of Russ and Siva walking down the street with the front line at UK. They were walking up and down Bourbon Street together and hanging out, and it sort of took the edge off, I thought, a little bit, of where fans went, you know what? The players, things have changed.
If they don't hate each other, maybe we don't need to hate each other. But to that point, even though the basketball teams generally do not hate each other, and it's just one game a year for them. But when you guys talk about it on the radio, all you have to say in June is say, who do you think is going to win the basketball game? And you don't speak again because your phone lines light up. Literally, it's the easiest gig known to mankind. I don't know why they pay you. I'm just joking. He's fantastic. But why is that about this particular game?
Well, number one, when you're talking about basketball especially, they've both been championship level for a long time. I mean, so they're both very good. So you know that, if you're Kentucky, Louisville, Carolina, Duke, there's a group of teams that you figure if your team's going to get to the championship, they're going to go through some combination of those teams. So it goes back to when Denny first came here, and I'm old enough to remember when they should have played for the national championship in 1975. And John Wooden and his team pulled out a win over Louisville in the semifinals, and then he announced he was retiring the next day. They should have played in 75 for the championship, so it was really cool when they did meet in the Final Four in 2012. But they've both been very good for a long time, and so that's a part of why it's so intense, because the basketball game that'll be played here next week in December, may have some impact on Selection Sunday, could impact on where you're seated, but ultimately, it's not as significant, really, as the football game on the impact of a season, because then you go on and you do well in your league, and if you're Kentucky, you win your league, and maybe you beat Kansas, and you're fine. And if you're Louisville, you do well in the ACC, and you're going to be fine on Selection Sunday. And the big stakes are when you meet in the Final Four or in a Sweet 16 like they did in 2014. But I think it's just the fact that they've both been so good for so long that, that's that rival. Number one, they're your rival. And number two, they could be one of your rivals to get to where you want your team to go.
Both fan bases have a sense of pride for that particular program because of all the successes that they both have had over the years.
And coaches will always try to downplay that in any, not just here, in any rivalry situation. That most often they try to downplay that. I remember Bill Kitely, legendary Kentucky equipment manager, Mr. Wildcat. He's told me one time, and if anybody had as good a feel for it as him, had a better feel for it than him, I can't imagine who it would be. He said, if you don't think that beating Louisville is important, just lose the game, and you'll find out how important it is.
What about you? I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, for your show, because you do talk about, you obviously are much larger with Louisville, but you do talk about Kentucky, and you do break those down, and your phone lines absolutely light up anytime you bring it up.
Yeah, because you're in the office. You're in the office with you. Everybody's had that boss where you walk in and he's got the stuff, the memorabilia on the back wall, and like he's the new boss, and you go, oh, here we go, right? If it's not your school, right? So you go, okay, here we go. But because it's everywhere you go, church and school and the gym, it's everywhere you go. It's the one thing. There's not a lot of common anymore, right? We don't have a lot in common. No one watches the same TV shows. We lost Alan Thicke today, right? Or yesterday. Mm-hmm. Everyone watched that show in the 80s. There's nobody, everybody's on Netflix. Everyone's separate. They have their separate. This is one of the only things that everybody gets in on. Even if you don't watch college basketball, you're not a fan, you'll pay attention that day. UofL UK in basketball, because you know you're going to have a conversation a little bit later. And the fact that these two teams, these two schools, are top 10 programs all time. And to be frank with you, UK is number one. They're the greatest. They have the most wins, the most, I don't know if it's the most Final Fours, but they've got the most everything, right? And Louisville is in the top 10. They're probably 6 or 7 all-time in college basketball. Not bad. Like, if we were anywhere else, we'd be number 6 overall in college basketball history, but we got these guys down the street. So it's ingrained, and you're right. You throw that out on the radio for the next week, and it's going to be a great conversation.
Dr. Grieve, is it a little bit more passionate, obviously, in here because you do have such a high percentage of both fan bases here? In your studies, what do you find as far as, the amount of, I don't know if the correct word is disdain for each other when you both live in that same community?
Well, I do know that the closer you are to the opponent, and the more contact you have with them, it can go one of two ways, right? We can build those bridges between the fans and see them as other people who like the other team, except on that night when I think they're idiots because they're not rooting for the right team, or we can see the build up that adversarial process, and we know that. I'm just thinking back. We did a study a few years ago where we looked at fans watching a game, and we had them rate the other fans. So how well did these other fans behave? And both sets said, oh, the other guys were just so horrible. They were obnoxious. They were terrible fans. I can't believe they said those things. And as an objective observer, I watched and said, I saw the same behaviors on both sides. So I think that as we are the more highly identified or the larger fan that we are, the more likely it is that we are to see what the other team does or the other people do as offensive and problematic.
Tony mentioned something that I think was really interesting. He said it was in 3 phases. Now, that third phase is the Rick versus Cal phase. From where you sit down in Bowling Green, do you think things heated up when we got to that third phase?
I have seen an increase in the rivalry in the last few years, yes. Because up until the mid-2000s, when we did research studies and we wanted to talk about who is the biggest rival for UK, it always came back to Duke. And I won't say the name because I don't want to put people into shock or fits here, but one certain player from Duke was also the biggest hated person. But when we do the studies, we'd say, if it's UK versus Duke, how can we, what comes up there? But in the last few years, when we've asked people, we've said, who's the biggest rival for UK? It always comes back to UL. Now, to some extent, when we ask people, well, who's the biggest rival of UL, it's always been UK. Although I would imagine quite a few years ago, Memphis may have been up on the radar screen.
Who was the coach there? Oh, yeah.
This was before him.
Okay.
So yes, I have seen that heat up since they've got the 2 really good coaches there.
I think one thing, you kind of brought it up, but, if there's one thing that a Kentucky fan and a Louisville fan can all agree on, they don't like Duke much. I think that's one thing that I think everybody can agree on. But from your all's seat, I'm going to ask you guys the same question. It does feel like things, since Calipari has come to Kentucky, that things have heated up a little more than before when it was Tubby Smith versus Rick Pitino.
Yeah, Tubby had worked for Rick, and they were close, and so there was a genuine friendship there. Cal and Rick, I think there's a mutual respect. I think you'd be crazy not to respect what the other guy can do, but I don't think they're each other's biggest fans. Whatever level, however you want to quantify that, but they're not going to, hang out together. They're going to be, mature adults when they cross paths on the recruiting trail or shake hands at the end of the game, et cetera. They're pros, but they're not going to keep each other's company at any point away from the basketball court. And so there's just a tension there that is much different than it was previously. And, it's funny. There was the same thing probably with Joe, B, and Denny, because Denny they weren't playing back in the mid-'70s and into the '80s, and Denny knew how good his program was, and he was pounding the drum for them playing. They ended up doing a radio show together, as everybody knows. I have a very hard time ever envisioning Cal and Rick doing that. But people would have said the same thing, I guess, back in the '70s and '80s, but that would seem to be, to me, a longer shot.
Best radio show ever.
Oh, it would be. It would be the greatest show ever. The dynamics between the two are unbelievable. It goes back to UMass, and Rick always taking credit for getting him the job at UMass, and I think Cal rubbed him wrong a little bit to say, you know what, I got the job on my own merits. I didn't, when Rick tells that story, they went over it in the Final Four, right? And Cal seemed uncomfortable throughout the entire conversation. And then, when Rick left Kentucky, I think Kentucky, they had trouble. Tubby was great. He was fantastic, but he wasn't Rick. And then Gillespie did his best, but he wasn't Rick, right? Okay, he wasn't certainly Rick. So it was like kind of a divorce, and they still had not replaced they haven't replaced the husband, right? So here comes Cal. So Rick had that always of like, well, I've gone from there, and they may hate me, but they haven't replaced me. And then Cal showed up and was doing things on level or even better than Rick was doing that. And then Kentucky fans, I thought, backed up a little bit and was like, we're okay now, all right? You got your little Louisville, that's fine, go coach Louisville. I'm okay with your life. We're happy now, right? So I think that's changed a little bit. But the dynamics also have now switched back. They're both Hall of Famers. I mean, we're so lucky to have both these guys in the state. People don't realize. Go to New Jersey or go to Pennsylvania and just bring up basketball, and they flip out. You have Cal and Rick in the same state, all right? And a lot of times, they're the same guy. They're different, but they're the same guy. They like to write books, right? About every 2 years.
I think a lot.
They have a book out, right? And then their slogans. They love slogans. Players first. Then what followed players first? Louisville first, right? And they're all trademarking everything. Everybody's got a T-shirt. But I think, and why I said that was a phase all its own is because it is. It really is. These are two of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, and we got them here at the same time. We are so lucky.
It's funny because there are moments since Calipari has come to Kentucky where they'll take a picture together in a restaurant or they'll do something, and you're like, you know what? They've buried the hatchet. And then some little thing gets said, and you're like, rivalry back on. Yeah. I mean, that's just the way they are. I mean, I think that's the relationship that they are going to have until, who knows, maybe they do a radio show together, which would be fantastic. Dr. Grieve, what's the one thing, and we'll get to some of your questions here after this. I want to know the one thing that has fascinated you the most in studying this particular rivalry.
One of the things that I have really found fascinating is how fans try to influence the outcome of games. We did a series of studies looking at fan superstitions and what people do outside and even within their own homes in order to influence the outcome of what's happening on the court. I distinctly remember one of the participants, we had a free response. We said, what do you do and how much does it affect the game? And one of the guys said, when I listen to the football team on the radio, when it's a big play, I'm driving in my car, I make sure nobody says anything in the car because I don't want them to throw off the play on the field. And again, how much does this affect it? Oh, it's a 10. It's very strongly affecting the outcome of the game. And so the things that we do as fans to try to help influence what happens, both good and bad. I mean, there are plenty of instances of poor fan behavior as well. But I think those are what most drives my interest in the whole field.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, what is it, before the Final Four game when the two gentlemen got in a fight at the dialysis center,
That was great.
that might have been stepping above the lines. All right, we're going to get to, I know a lot of you guys have questions for the folks up here, and we're going to go back here to this back microphone, and we're going to start that portion.
From a UK fan, but we're probably open to anybody's response on this. Is there anything that either UK or U of L or both could do to make it a better experience in the rivalry and improve the rivalry for the fans and for the two schools?
Nothing that really comes to mind. I mean, it's if you're uncomfortable by the tension, then I don't know that that's going to ever change. I think to make the experience better, it would be hard to imagine that you could, because I'm with Kent. I think it's as good as I don't think there's any rivalry better. Unfortunately, we did have the dialysis fight, but we haven't had anybody poison trees like Alabama and Auburn. So fortunately, we haven't gone too far off the cliff in terms of this rivalry. So I don't really, nothing really comes to mind in terms of improving it.
The only thing I would say is I would like to set it. I don't like a Wednesday night. I will tell you that. I don't like noon on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. I don't like that either. This is a New Year's Eve experience. So why put it on New Year's Eve when it is in itself a New Year's Eve party and it needs to stand on its own? To tell you the truth, we had this discussion because this is what we do on radio. I would like to kick off the season with it. I like to have the basketball games start the basketball season. You know, and I know football is so much better. Kentucky's so much better. Louisville football is so much better. So we have that distraction. But I would like to come and nail down a date and have it stand on its own. Because I got to tell you, college basketball needs this rivalry to stay where it is. College basketball is not like college football. College football owns the world. College basketball needs to do something to promote itself. And sticking it on a Wednesday night's not very good. Now, North Carolina Duke can do it because they play 3 times. But Duke and Louisville and Kentucky, to me, to make it better, I think set a date and play it on a Saturday night.
I'll say this. I do not like the game to kick off the season. And the reason why I do not like the game to kick off a season or to tip off a season in November is because at that particular time, college football is king. Yeah. And there's not a single basketball game that is going to trump that nationally. Everybody's going to be talking, especially now, everybody is going to be debating the college football playoffs. You know, years ago, they used to play this game more in early December, you know, and I think that is a perfect situation for that because you're done with all the college football championship games. The games are set, the bowls are set, and then college basketball is really ready to take center stage. I think that's a perfect place. And as far as the atmosphere for the games, you know, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that there is an unbelievable buzz every time, whether it's in the Yum Center or whether it's in Rupp Arena, whether it's in Indianapolis at the Sweet 16 that year or in the Superdome. There is an unbelievable buzz in the arena, but you don't see fights. Like, you don't see people yelling and screaming at each other. I mean, everybody has been civil, but you definitely feel the tension. You can, as Gorilla Monsoon, an old WWE wrestling announcer, used to say, man, the tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. I love it.
Do you think that maybe would playing more games, like a home and home each year, would that enhance the series, or would it water it down some?
I think, in my personal opinion, I like them playing once a year. And the reason why you'll never get 2 games in a year is because of conference and what they want to do outside of the conference and things of that nature.
Yeah, it could have been times where they could have ended up, if things had played out right, in the same conference, and they would have played 2 or maybe even 3 times a year like Duke and Carolina sometimes do when you get to the ACC tournament. I like it better just one game. But I think Tony makes a good point. I would like to see it just on a Saturday. Maybe CBS is always looking for a game to kick off their college basketball coverage. It was Kentucky and Carolina for several years. They did it with Kentucky UCLA this year. If they could ever get the 2 schools to agree and get CBS in on that, that'd be a great way to just plan to start every year with the first Saturday in December, be Kentucky and Louisville play and lead into the Army-Navy game on CBS.
100% agree. All right, let's go back to the back microphone again.
Here are 2 questions on the same one. Why is the game on Wednesday the 21st at 7 p.m.? And the other one is, how many times has the winner of the football game between UK and UofL won the basketball game in the same year?
We talked about this yesterday, and Tom probably can answer why it's on Wednesday. I'm sure it was a conflict with scheduling and
Well, because the Saturday after the 21st is Christmas. Nobody ever plays on Christmas. The following week is when they usually play on New Year's Eve. Louisville had already been locked in for several years with Indiana. So sometimes this game floats a little bit, and they just try to find the best date possible. So as far as scheduling goes, I mean, it was really, there was no other option to have this. It's not fun for fans and everybody else, but it was just something that had to happen this year.
And before the current streaks, it was the rule. If you won the football game, you lost the basketball game, and vice versa, right? So, but then both teams started going on a streak. Louisville just got their football streak broken at 5, and Kentucky's wins. I think basketball is at 5 right now currently. So, yeah. So,
The next question is, does the rivalry benefit either or both schools, and is there an impact on fan bases when they have such a strong rivalry?
Absolutely. I think that the rivalry games do affect the schools, although, in the way that we've talked about here, right? Let's get CBS to show them on TV to kick off the basketball season. There's immediate revenue coming into both schools, and that leads to exposure, which also leads to more fans, which then again promotes the rivalry back. So yes, I do think it does have a very good, strong effect on both of the universities.
Without naming the other school, which schools do you all feel have the worst fans, and what leads to that and that reputation? Dr. Grieve to start.
Okay, all right.
He's the guy who studies it.
Well, personally, I think that the school to the south of my home state has the worst fans around, but the actual answer is I think that all fans act pretty much the same, and so to answer your question is I would have to ask, what team are you a fan of and who's your biggest rival, and those will be the people that you think act the worst out there.
The only story I can remember is going in to LSU's Tiger Stadium on the buses with the Kentucky team several years ago, and the road weaves through campus to the stadium, and so you got all these people out there tailgating, and they know it's the other team coming in, and this was Kentucky, it wasn't their big rival, it wasn't Alabama there, and the roads lined on both sides with LSU fans from 8 to 80. And they're all telling us we're number 1. But not with the normal finger that you would use to suggest that. So that's one story.
You know, one thing I say about fans all the time is, when there's a debate is I always say, all fans are the same. They just wear different colors, and it doesn't matter if you're Alabama in football or if you're Mississippi Valley State. Every fan base has a certain percentage of fans that go over the line. There's just way more Alabama fans than there are fans of Mississippi Valley State. I mean, that's just the way it is. And you're either, in line with the color that you root for, or you're not.
One of the great rivalries, as I was just coming up as a fan, Eastern and Western in football and basketball. And that's not at the Division I level of Kentucky Louisville, but there was 1AA, I guess they called it in football at the time. Most Division I in basketball, but it was as intense as it gets.
And that's as heated as it's ever gotten.
Well, it is. It's like politics. You have most fans are okay, and they don't live their lives right. But there's that 10% either way, right? That sort of control the message, and you're like, that's not what we all think, right? But that person's up there talking for you, right? So that fan talks for you. I've always said it. I thought the worst, that 10% that seems to be the worst, and you know what? They are. Sorry, they are the worst. The 10% Louisville fan, the Louisville fan portion is is insecure, and Kentucky fans delusional. All right, UK fan believes, and these are just the worst part of the fans. Kentucky fan believes they should win it every single year, which is delusional. You need to relax a little bit. And Louisville fan is insecure. They've been the little brother. That moniker has been around forever, and it fits perfectly for a lot of years. And personally, I like being the underdog. I like being the underdog and the little brother. But their Louisville fan, at their worst, can be insecure about things. So they take things a little bit more seriously. And UK fans goes in the season, no matter what, they're winning the national title, and it's not good enough if you don't. So.
For again, anyone on the panel, what's the most chaotic event that you've witnessed or heard about at a U of L or UK game?
You've been in a lot more than I have. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I've just got a scan here. There's nothing that's immediately leaping to mind. I'm sure somebody will come up with something. Oh, yeah. You had the fight, the little scuffle before the football game a couple of years ago here. Is the line from Anchorman, that escalated quickly. That was kind of, you see that in college football from time to time when the teams are out there warming up and they'll end up, somebody will say something and they'll end up going at it, and that ends up on ESPN like it did that day.
It just doesn't go to that level. I just don't think, and no offense.
We haven't had any bad incidents.
Right, no offense to West Virginia, but it doesn't get to West Virginia level, man, all right? I mean, that's not where it goes. And I will tell you, in the basketball game specifically, the athletic directors, they control that also. I remember Steve Crackthorpe had said something on the floor after maybe whatever game it was, and then I know that Tom Jurich had gone down to him and said, let's not, and apologized to Barnhart and said, sorry, that he had said that. And it was nothing really bad. He just was boastful on the floor or whatever. It wasn't even really mean. But I think both athletic directors, they try to control that. If it's going to be in Rupp Arena or Yum Center or Freedom Hall, they're going to make sure that it's a pleasant experience for the other side as they come in. I think that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, fan-wise, I don't think that there ever has been an incident that I've ever, in all my years of covering these games, that ever got out of hand. On the court, I would say Patino versus Cal 1 in Rupp Arena. It was, I forget, Jared Swapshire and Reginald Delk was in that game, and Eric Bledsoe, DeMarcus Cousins. They all had incidents, and it looked from the get-go like both teams came in with a major edge. Like they were going to set some kind of a tone from the opening tip, and there was more tension in that game than any other game that I've ever seen. And there was a lot of chippiness, and that game almost got out of hand. I feel like there was 75 foul calls in that game. The refs needed it. Because it was the game that everybody anticipated that year, and it was like it was all over, and everybody was like, well, just thank God that's over, because that was awful. But I think that was the one game that got was chippy above anything else.
Yeah, and it seems I think they're both sides want to win it so desperately, and they're go, I'm sure, to the nth degree in terms of doing every bit of preparation that they can. They have talented players and Hall of Fame coaches that you rarely don't have that great classic game. Like football's given us a few of those, but in basketball they've been low shooting percentage games, more fouls, that kind of thing. Nothing that got out of hand, like you said, but just not classically beautiful basketball game. Kentucky UCLA a few weeks ago was a up and down 97-92 kind of game, and you haven't seen as many of those.
The next question is, as a result of the third stage of the rivalry, does any of the panelists think that U of L is making significant inroads out in the rest of the state, outside of Louisville, as a result of that rivalry? Or are they contracting, I guess, would be the opposite?
Actually, I think that the number of Louisville fans are increasing outside of the city of Louisville. At least down in my part of the state, there do seem to be. It used to be all Big Blue down there, all UK. If you weren't, well, we'll root for Western, but really we're UK fans. And now I see it more evenly split. It's about 50-50. In terms of whether they root for Louisville or whether they root for UK.
I want to ask Tom that same exact question, because he lives in Lexington, and a couple years after Louisville won the title, they did a big tour of the state and had great turnouts everywhere. In fact, they even had a really good turnout in Lexington. Have you seen an increase maybe of Louisville fans in the city of Lexington?
Yeah, I think probably so. I don't know how to quantify it, whether it's gone from X percent to 20% more, 30% more, 10% more, whatever that is. But yeah, I think so. And maybe part of that is over time because of the way media has changed in the 70s and 80s, every game wasn't on TV, and now if you can be a Louisville fan and get to see that team play every game all throughout their season now, and maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's definitely a bigger percentage.
I want to ask you.
I think it's football. I think it's football. I think there's football fans out in the state that adopted UofL. Now they're UK fans, but they enjoyed watching Teddy Bridgewater play, Brian Braun play football. There's Bob Petrino's putting insane numbers out. They're beating Florida. They're going into bowl games and all that. And Kentucky was trying to get their way and trying to move their way through the SEC, which is a tough way to go. But I think football, not basketball, is the reason that you had some Louisville signs out there in the state, because they enjoy watching that brand of football.
And maybe at times I look at things just a little bit more close. I feel like sometimes with the percentage of fans on both sides within this city, I almost feel like after somebody wins, for instance, during football season, I thought I saw a lot more UofL stuff in the city. After Kentucky upsets them, I'm like, whoa, there's a lot more Kentucky football fans now all of a sudden, around. So I feel like after whoever wins the game, you're going to see a lot more of apparel, flags on cars for that other school. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm looking closer at it than
we call that basking in reflected glory.
I'm going to write that down.
No, actually, in all seriousness, one of the things I think that drives people becoming fans is success of a team. And with Louisville being more successful in football in the last decade or so, and consistently being successful in basketball, I think that's going to drive people to start following them. The younger folks or new people to the state will pick up, and when they're trying to decide a team, they generally will go with the one that's successful.
I'll start with Dr. Grieve again. Can a fan be a fan of both teams?
Yes, people can, although it's weird. And I think when it comes down to it, when the rubber hits the road, the way this works is I'm a fan of both teams, and I want them both to do well until they play each other. And then at that point, you've got to make a decision. And it depends. Everybody, I think, makes their own personal decision on who they want to pull for in that game. But the answer is yes, you can.
I agree. Yeah, I think you can. I think you can be fans of both. I mean, I really do. I mean, it is, especially if you just, boil it down to their kids. I mean, you can, the red, the blue, whatever, they're still kids. I mean, these are 19-year-old kids trying to rebound the ball. And that, there are times that you, again, not playing each other, but you can cheer for them against another team. Especially in football also, because Kentucky's got to climb that big hill of SEC. If you're a downright football fan, every once in a while, they're playing number one LSU, and it looks like they're going to upset them. You want to hate them, but you're like, you know what, go get this one.
I don't know if I go so far as for a large segment anyway that can be fans of both. You can respect both, but I think there's a certain level of fandom that I think most fans get to where it's hard to then say you're rooting for your rival. So you can respect them, but I don't know that people will root for them. Now there's another segment that maybe isn't as deeply invested in the team that they root for, and then maybe they could split it down the middle. But it's hard, I think, for most level of fans. They get to a level where they have a hard time comprehending that concept.
This is somewhat related to the rivalry. Hypothetical, if a person runs a sports bar in Louisville, what do you do on New Year's Eve? You have 2 bowl games and the Louisville IU basketball game.
Have more than one television.
Put up tents outside. cash in as best you can.
With that, that's a shame. I mean, that's kind of a shame that we all have. He would love, to do, or Paul Rogers now has to, choose. I mean, Indiana in Louisville is one of the biggest games. To me, it's number 2 behind Kentucky for basketball this year. I mean, those two matchups are great, and now Paul's going to do the football, and somebody else is going to call the basketball game. So to me, it's going to be a crazy day. By the way, I mean, 3 games at the exact same time. They're not even stacked and tiered up. They are at the same time. So, well, even if you're at home, choose, have the picture-in-picture ready.
There's a level of this that when you are working it, that there's a business element to it as well as that's different from the fandom. So, and I'm not sure how Paul's situation works. All broadcasters are different. I know I'm paid by the game. So if they're playing at the same time, I lose money. Yeah. So I definitely don't ever want them to play at the same time.
Well, and from our perspective, I mean, we have 3 major games in 3 major cities within an hour and a half. So we've got a crew that's going to be in Orlando. We've got a crew that's going to be in Jacksonville. And then I will be with somebody up at the basketball game at 12:30. So, I mean, there's a lot. You have to move. I mean, it's almost like in my business, it's like moving chess pieces around, just so you can get everything that you can cover. By the way, the Louisville LSU Citrus Bowl game will be on WHAS11.
I tell you where it's going to be the craziest.
Small plug.
Is in the building where Tony works for iHeartRadio, because they've got three games going to be going on at the same time, and they got to find places to put them.
Yeah, football will be on UK Football HAS, UofL Football 790, and UofL Basketball on 1080, just by the way. Which is the best way to watch the games, is to listen to Tom and Paul. We talk about Cal, and I'm going to boast on you a little bit. Look, we talk about Cal and Rick in the same state. 2 of the best in the business, Tom Leach, Paul Rogers, lifers, and also.
Thank you, and I'll thank you on behalf of Paul. And in my office, I've got a picture, talking about that day in New Orleans. Mike Pratt and I and Paul and Bob Valvano took a picture together, because we said, this may not ever happen again. It never happened for Carolina and Duke in the Final Four. And so we've got a picture of the 4 of us down there in the arena in New Orleans.
And the best thing about it is Paul knows how to pronounce Mahmoud, and Tom knows how to pronounce Adebayo. That's a big thing.
It is.
This question is first for Mr. Leach, and then a separate question for everybody else. Should UK play IU in Bloomington?
As a fan, I'd love to see the game, because if they did, that means they would be coming to Lexington every other year too. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see it as a fan. I understand why it hadn't happened as it played out. It was a little bit of a scary situation that day up there when IU won that game and everybody rushed the floor. Darius Miller was kind of slumped down on the floor after Watford hit the shot, and fortunately nobody got hurt, but somebody could have. So it could have gotten dangerous in that situation, and you see that other times. So if I'm the coach of Kentucky at that point, I might say, look, let's just play this. Cal offered to play it in Indianapolis every year, as it used to alternate between Indianapolis and Louisville, and they played neutral courts every year. So I tend to think at some point they might get back to that. I don't know, and maybe probably will at some point get back to a home and home maybe. But it just from a fan standpoint, it's a great historic arena to work in as a broadcaster, so that was fun, and it was just it's a great rivalry, and so from a fan standpoint, I'd love to see it come back, but I can understand why it's not at this time.
It's the single worst trend in college basketball is moving to these neutral sites. I'm sorry. Kentucky should play Michigan State at Rupp, and then they should go up there. The game should be at Indiana, and then next year at Rupp. Louisville should play. I think every once in a while, when it's an opportunity for television, that's great. But I think it's the worst trend for fans. They should play those darn games in their home arenas. You're paying too darn much money to have these schedules, and IU's on the schedule, but no, they're not playing at Bloomington, which would be a great thing for a U of L fan to go to Bloomington and watch a game in Assembly Hall. That's a historic building. Instead, we have a great place in the field house where the Pacers play. That's going to be fun. It's got luxury boxes. It's great. Everyone can have a drink and whatever, but it's still not the same. It's still not the same as Assembly Hall. I think it's the worst trend that they've started, and it's a money issue. Don't worry. It's all about television and money, and they can split the gate rather than have it all to themselves. So I get that, the dynamics of paying for your programs, but when you're Kentucky and Louisville and Indiana, I'm sorry, you don't need the money.
And if you look at it, from a Louisville fan perspective, even though the question was about Indiana, Kentucky, other than, I mean, you know every other year you're going to play Kentucky and that's going to be a home and home thing. But if you're a Louisville season ticket holder in basketball, your one big game, non-conference, was Purdue. You know, the rest of it is and God love EKU. It's EKU this Saturday, Texas Southern, games like that, which aren't exactly, everybody is striving and getting in line to go to the arena. Kentucky, their one non-conference game was UCLA. That's any count that anybody wanted to go to. I agree. I have two different viewpoints because I was in Assembly Hall that day when they rushed the court. And I love Assembly Hall, and I think the fans up there are amazing. I have my head or my heart says, yes, they should play in Assembly Hall and Rupp Arena, and they should rotate each and every year. But then, your mind goes to what I saw, and if I was the coach of that team, and Darius Miller, I saw him almost get trampled, and we talk about a small percentage of fan bases, and there was a small percentage of Indiana fans that were waiting for Marcus Teague and yelling some unpleasant things and literally try to get at that kid and fight him. So if I'm a coach, I understand, look, I'm not going to go back there. I agree with Tom. I think eventually that those two will have, and I don't know where that will be, but, how they used to play it in the Hoosier Dome and Freedom Hall, I think they'll try to work something like that out, in the future. But for me, there's just two parts of it. There's the head part, and then there's the try to put myself in somebody else's shoes, which I really can't do. Is that it?
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Keep your answers short.
That question actually was.
You guys got to get back to work.
You all were leading to, and that was what ended the Big Four, the games that used to be played in the Hoosier Dome between Louisville, Notre Dame, Kentucky, and Indiana, and why did that end? And has there ever been any discussion about trying to bring that back as a classic?
I have no idea.
I can't remember why that didn't. I tell you, this is a good segue to kind of close us out on. We should all keep in our prayers Earl Cox's family, legendary sports figure here that we lost this week. Earl would know, and Earl would have been here. He would have been in the back of the room and would have had the answer to that. I don't know. I can't remember.
I have no idea. Contracts.
Can we just give everybody just one last final thought to leave you guys on? I'm done. I love the game. I can't wait for next week.
I have to say that one of the things that academics do is we research the things that we know, and I have been a lifelong sport fan and really enjoy doing it. I do think that fandom brings a lot to us, and I appreciate you having me up.
I appreciate you asking us to come here and talk about this. It's the one thing, like I said, that brings us all together. There's a lot that we don't have in common, but this one is that we can always have a conversation about the UofL basketball game.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. I apologize. I'm a little froggy. I've felt worse than I sounded for the last few days. Today, I feel better than I sound. So it's kind of gone the other way. But I love the game. As a broadcaster, you love those kinds of games. You look forward to those. That's just like for players. I mean, it's just there's a different buzz in the arena. You can sense it. You can feel it. Hopefully, it comes through on the air. So, rivalry games are great for that reason because that's why we all get involved. We don't get involved as fans to see them play Texas Southern or Valparaiso. It's Kentucky Louisville. It's Louisville Indiana. It's Kentucky North Carolina. Those are the ones that get your adrenaline going.
Okay, great. Well, on behalf of the entire Louisville Forum, I would like to thank our panelists. And we have, for each of you, our exclusive Louisville Forum Mint Julep Cup. So thank you all for participating today. And our next meeting is going to be held on Wednesday, January 11th. And we're hoping to be joined by Speaker of the House, Jeff Hoover, and we also have Senator Morgan McGarvey that will be giving us a preview of the upcoming General Assembly for 2017. And then put on your calendars, our annual meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 15th, and we're going to have the Honorable Jerry Abramson. He's going to be our keynote speaker, and he's going to share with us what he's done as Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for President Barack Obama. So some exciting programs coming up. And if you'd like to register for any of those, please go to LouisvilleForum.org. You can register online, or you can call our voicemail at 329-0111. So thank you all, and have a great day.